Katt Williams has become the Tupac of comedy because he has announced that Kevin Hart's ex-wife, Tori Hart, is going to be opening for him on this comedy tour, which made me think about the song Hit 'Em Up.
I'm all for the truth, right? If it's the truth, it's the truth. But I also think there's a reason why you do share some truths and why you don't share other truths. To me, watching the entire interview, it felt like, I stayed too long at the party.
Yo, this is the Inflection Collective. All of us are connected, reflective, real life perspective, respected. The banter, the chit chat, no cap, is big facts, so kick back. This here is done there, been there.
And now the news that just came out that really got me, I believe that Katt Williams has become the Tupac of comedy because he has announced, and his Kevin Hart's ex-wife just announced that Tori Hart is going to be opening for him on this comedy tour, which made me think about the song Hit 'Em Up, the diss song, one of the greatest hit songs, songs of all time, rap songs, the diss songs of all time, coming out. And the first words of that was, "That's why I your wife." You know what I mean? I don't think he's doing that, obviously, but I think the fact that he's got Tori Hart opening up for him on this this tour, that's a little bit of a jab. I'm not saying Tori's good. Don't get me wrong. Tori deserves her opportunities, and I'm happy that she's getting her opportunity. But you got to believe that's a little bit of a marketing ploy as well.
Well, you know what? It might just be a timing situation. Katt generally does travel with women openers, so I think it could just so happen that the timing of the release of the interview and everybody talking about it, and the timing of when these dates came up. I mean, it could be by design, but he generally does travel with a female comic.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, shout out to Katt and Tori Hart. Overall, what did you think of the interview? Like, is Katt, people wondering how much is true, how much isn't? Now there's this big debate about who steals jokes and who doesn't, and he's exposed. And it seems like Katt has become that uncle. Everybody's got uncles, right? And you got uncles that you love, and some of them that your mom, like he's been to jail before and all that type of stuff like that. It's got some issues. But you know how the uncles start arguing with one another? And now the other uncles who have, done well for themselves, all of them have done well for themselves. They look at that one uncle who always stirs shit up. And I think Katt is that uncle that's stirring shit up. And it's a big fight amongst the family right now, meaning the black culture in the comedy world, whether whose side are you on? Is Katt telling the truth? And now the people who believe Katt are coming for Steve Harvey hard. They're coming for Cedric the Entertainer hard. They're pulling them up old interviews. We'll get to one that I did with Mark Curry in a few minutes right here. But now people are taking sides, and I'm wondering what you feel like that's doing for the comedy community.
Personally, I think it's much ado about nothing. I mean, most of the stories that Katt Williams was talking about are at least a decade, if not 2 decades old. And also, you have to remember that everyone has their own perspective, right? So I think specifically, let's say the case of Ricky Smiley saying he was up for the role of Money Mike. Mm-hmm. That might be Ricky Smiley's actual experience of it because he auditioned for the role. But as we know, just because you audition for a role doesn't necessarily mean you were up for the role, right. And that's semantics, right? Mm-hmm. And so it might be a matter of, okay, yeah, I saw Ice Cube came out and said, yeah, Ricky did read for the part, but we felt he would be better in this other part, and Katt was better for Money Mike. So 2 things can be true, right? It's just about the perception. As far as what Katt actually was talking about, I think I'm all for the truth, right? If it's the truth, it's the truth. But I also think there's a reason why you do share some truths and why you don't share other truths. To me, watching the entire interview, it felt like, I stayed too long at the party. It's like when more people start leaving the room, different parts of people's personalities start coming out. So, I mean, obviously it was riveting to watch Katt's experience of what he feels happened in comedy and being able to have points of reference that we all can then say, that's interesting. I wonder, I don't get all the hubbub about it because I think that's what people do on podcasts now, right? Yeah. I think people like to tell that, hey, I was in the room 25 years ago when this conversation happened, or I know what this person said who's dearly departed, or I know how the origin story for this. So I didn't get why it was such a big deal. I really didn't.
Well, first of all,
stop that actually has something to do with that as well. But It's one of those things where I'm all for conversation. I'll go further into stop that. I'm not sure why everybody felt like they needed to add to the conversation.
Well, here's the thing, and that's a good point, Eunice, because I put a tweet out after it came out. One thing that 2024 has already taught us is what we already know, that we love us some mess or controversy. We do. That's why we buy into it. We buy into people tearing each other down in a sense. And I'm not just talking about Black people. I'm talking about all of us. We like drama. We like intrigue. Even being on these reality shows. If it ain't drama, then it's boring. You know what I mean? So Katt coming out here and telling his truth or his side of the truth is one thing. Now, what I will say is, like, we do want the truth. We feel like, hey, it's great when somebody speaks their truth and being transparent. But at the same time, at what expense is that? And how much is your truth really reality? You know, like you said, he could be telling 80% of the truth, but that 20% of the non-reality could be affecting somebody else, you know, especially when it comes to joke stealing, which is a heinous crime in the comedy
Yes,
world.
well, let me say it's about joke stealing. Let me say it's about joke stealing because there's so many long-standing beefs about joke stealing. And I think as a comedian myself and as a comedy writer, I think one of the ways to avoid that, and again, this is wishful thinking on my part, but one of the ways to avoid that is to not just go for everybody's shared experience. You know, I think sometimes when comedians go for joke A, we all saw the same thing. We all would tell that same joke, or we've all been as a single woman dating. I could potentially tell the exact same joke that every other single woman dating could tell because we're having a very shared experience, right?
Right.
And so then I will consciously try to talk about the guy that I was texting at 3:35 yesterday because that will be a more unique experience to try to build my material off of. So it's, you know, it's been beef between comedians over marching band jokes. It's been beef over comedians over pop locking jokes. You know, it's a shared experience. So yeah, more than likely people would have similar premises if you don't dig deeper for something that could be a little bit more nuanced and personal.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to really say someone stole a joke from someone outside of it outright being like, wow, I just told this joke. This person just saw the joke and they told it tomorrow. And is there anything new under the sun?
No, not really, especially when it comes to the culture. Now, one of the things I was talking about is an interview I did with Mark Curry some years ago when I was on Fox Soul resurfaced because of the Katt Williams interview where he actually mentioned Mark Curry and Steve Harvey hadn't stolen one of his jokes. Here's that interview in question of who we're talking about. Cool, and pick it up. So Mark obviously was a little upset. He would never tell me exactly what Steve said to him and what he said to Steve or whatever. When I see Steve, maybe he'll say it, maybe he won't. But here's the thing about the whole joke stealing premise thing. Like you mentioned, a lot of jokes are the same because we are in a culture. And I think the best jokes tellers are the ones that can relate to the audience. In our culture, we have so many similarities about things. So if there's a premise about, I talk about my divorce, I talk about, you know, my upbringing, I talk about my mom, I talk about certain things like that. In our culture, we all have similar experiences. So if the premise of the joke is the same, it's one thing. But if it's word for word and you're basically stealing everything, like in the Steve Harvey joke, I gotta say, and I don't know, sometimes Steve may have had a writer that heard it somewhere and he said it, you know, and brought it in. That happens in the business as well. The Cedric the Entertainer joke where he basically took one of the jokes or whatever and then he made it a spaceship. It's a little too similar. It's almost like sampling, right? You know, I remember who was that? What's the singer's name? The white guy, Robin Thicke. Remember Robin Thicke, the Thin Line? If it's proven to be too close for comfort, then of course you can get sued. I think it's the same thing in comedy. If it's too close in the actual premise, the setup, and the actual words you're saying, like the Steve Harvey joke, if you listen to Mark Curry's original joke, it sounds exactly like Mark Curry's when it came to Steve Harvey. So I think that is an infraction. And I think when that happens sometimes, I think it's imperative for the comedian to say, hey, man, maybe I didn't write that joke because you do have joke tellers, right? And also just go, hey, man, bro, my bad. It was too close for comfort. Maybe subconsciously, I did not know that was your joke. Maybe I thought I you know, because you can go to a comedy club one night, hear a joke, go to sleep the next night, 2 weeks later, and think, oh, man, I got this great idea for a joke. And that's why a lot of comedians
all the time. Right. Right. It happens all the time that you get inspired by something, you hear something. Sometimes you don't remember, like, wait, was that a conversation I was having with somebody? Did I see that on TV? Did I hear somebody tell it? So as a comedian, you have to be kind of hyper vigilant of where are you sourcing your material. As a host, I like hosting comedy. What I will do a lot of times is I will watch every act and then I usually can reference something that that person said because I probably have a similar premise or joke. So it might be you come off stage and I say, yo, Mike was talking about XYZ. That reminds me of the time that, you know, because there was a similarity, there was a premise. And so it's a way that it might just be, hey, this is a moment that I can tie into what's happening. And again, it's a fine line between inspiration and stealing. I think back in the day, it was easier to steal material because we didn't have cameras and receipts for everything. As a comedian myself, I don't upload material that's not specific to me because, anybody in the world could see your material and be performing your whole set in New York for bigger dollars and bigger laughs. And if they have a bigger name, no one's going to think they stole the joke from the one you've never heard of. And so that's another reason why a lot of comedians don't want you to film their material. They want you to upload material because it is such an intellectual property that it's hard to put your stamp on it, especially if it's, public domain and in a general consensus, as you say, cultural experience, particularly. But you also have documentation of comedians who were just known joke stealers.
Oh, yeah.
Some of our heroes, Robin Williams was accused of it quite a bit. And it's one of those things that I think Carlos Mencia had to struggle with those accusations. Once you get the label, it's kind of like that scarlet letter. You don't want the tag as a joke stealer for sure. But like I watched Chelsea Handler's last special. Her material was so similar to the material that I do that I consciously stopped doing the material. But she's also talking about being a certain age, which I am. She's talking about being single, which I am. She's talking about dating. So we're having a shared lived experience. But guess who's going to look like they're biting off a Chelsea Handler? Me. So you have to manage yourself accordingly.
Yo, this is the Inflection Collective. All of us are connected, reflective, real life perspective, respected. The banter, the chit chat, no cap is big facts, so kick back. This here is done there, been there.